live on YouTube now. Okay. It's 3:30. I'm gonna just let's hang out for a couple minutes just to give folks a chance to join us on the YouTube live stream. How you all doing? It's Indigenous Peoples Day.
Yes. Always Indigenous Peoples Day.
Yes, yes. Which shirts are you wearing? Which earrings are you wearing? Okay. Let's see. Well, all right. You ladies ready?
Always.
Okay. So I want to welcome all of our participants on this webinar and everyone at home viewing on YouTube. Welcome to We Are All on Native Land, a conversation about land acknowledgements. I'm really glad that we have such an overwhelming just response from people interested in this topic. And what a great way to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day by talking about native land, right? So I want to introduce myself. My name is Debra Yepa-Pappan. I'm Jemez Pueblo and Korean. I'm a mother, wife, daughter, artist, Chicagoan, and currently I'm the community engagement coordinator at the Field Museum. And as many folks know, we are renovating our Native American Hall. So I want to welcome my friends and colleagues here who are joining me in this conversation. And I'm gonna go ahead and give you all a chance to introduce yourselves, starting with Heather.
Hi, everybody. My name is Heather Miller. I am an enrolled citizen of the Wyandotte Nation from Oklahoma. I am the executive director of the American Indian Center here in Chicago. And I am a lover and hater of land acknowledgement. So I cannot wait to tell you guys why. And I'm going to turn it back over to Debra for our next panelist.
Oh, Felicia.
Haku everyone, alap Felicia Garcia, alap Samala Chumash, I no Castro iti. Hello, my name is Felicia Garcia. I'm Samala Chumash from San Ynez, California, and I'm very happy to be here with you today. And just really grateful to be sharing this space with the most incredible group of Indigenous women. So thank you all for joining me today. I am the Curator of Education at the School for Advanced Research's Indian Arts Research Center in Santa Fe, and I'm also the author of a guide to Indigenous land and territorial acknowledgements. Thank you.
Meranda.
Hi, everybody. My name is Meranda. I am a enrolled member of the Yerington Paiute tribe, which is in Nevada. I am also Chicana. I grew up in Southern California. I have a PhD in Native American Studies and a master's in public history. And my work is at the Field Museum right now is really much centered on how do we better represent Native people within these spaces, especially these colonial spaces, and thinking about how do we start to activate the way people think about land and the relationship we have to land. So thank you all for being here.
Yeah, I'm so glad for this. So just to let everyone at home know, this isn't a panel discussion, but I, really just want this to be just a conversation between, these four Native awesome women. And so I guess we should just start off with some of the burning questions that people have. Let's start off with, what is a land acknowledgement? Why should I do a land acknowledgement? And why should I even care whose land I'm on? So whoever wants to start us off, go for it.
I can start. I think, I mean, the most basic definition that I give to people of what a land acknowledgement is that it is a statement that recognizes the Indigenous people and their withstanding connection to the land on which a meeting, event, or building is currently residing, I don't know, taking place. And for me, it's also, I mean, I think for everyone on this panel, it's not just a statement, it's a commitment to further action and developing relationships, mutually beneficial relationships with that Indigenous community.
Yeah, I think land acknowledgements, when we think about them in their truest form right now, we think of them as something someone does in the beginning of any sort of discussion they begin to have, or if they're breaking ground for a building, but they've kind of become performative, and in the sense that everyone can just look up the names of the people who were here first and who are still here. But then I'm always thinking, at least for myself, what does that even mean by you just acknowledging them? Like, what are you wanting to do for those communities? And if you don't know what to do, how do I help you try to understand what you can do? Because a lot of the time I know that we are all kind of stuck in our, little bubbles, but I think we need to start thinking about acknowledging the land, but then also what happened to the people who were here. What is their history and why aren't they here? And if they are, what does that look like? What does your relationship to them look like? And if you are, one of the things I told the group earlier was, once I start being asked to do more land acknowledgements, I'm going to ask the institution, what are you doing to support Native people? Are you hiring them? Are you promoting them? Are you building relationships? Because at this point, it's even more important than just giving off names. Like, it's time to take some action.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I mean, I think one issue that I have with land acknowledgements, and maybe Heather, this is where you have this, like, that hate relationship part of a land acknowledgement is, sometimes it's just a statement, right? And sometimes it's just empty words. So, I guess that's another question that people that I've been getting recently too is, how do you make a land acknowledgement meaningful? Is it just making a meaningful statement, or is it following through with meaningful action?
Yeah, those are some really good points and some really great questions. And that, I think, leads to more discussion around why I have this love-hate relationship with land acknowledgements. So for me, in my position at the Indian Center, we get asked for land acknowledgements all the time, because on one hand, they're the shiny new object. They're the thing that everybody wants. Everybody wants a land acknowledgement. And that's good to a certain extent, because for me, land acknowledgements represent a change in our thinking. It's one step towards removing colonized structures that exist. It's one way to change our thinking around structural racism that exists in this country. And so that's just one piece of what a land acknowledgement can actually be. So that's why I love them. I think absolutely everybody should do them. It gets us to start thinking about the fact that we are on Native land, and this has and always will be Native land. So that piece is great. But as Meranda alluded to already, oftentimes what happens is they are the shiny new thing. So everybody just wants to do them. They want to do them very quickly. And they're done for performative reasons, or they're done to make someone just feel better about themselves. And they really miss the key pieces around relationship building and establishing true trust and working to better the relationships of Native peoples that actually still live here and are thriving today.
And just going off of what Heather said, I definitely agree that among cultural institutions and non-Native individuals, they are this kind of trend or shiny new thing, but they are, it's important to emphasize that it's an Indigenous protocol. And so a lot of times people ask me, like, when did it start? Who invented it? But in fact, these statements have been embedded in Indigenous cultures for centuries, if not longer, thousands of years. And so I think that's important to point out, and not just that, but that Indigenous people have been calling for settlers and non-Indigenous people to recognize the land for decades. It's not a new thing that we are just starting to advocate for.
And to kind of just like situate that as well is that I was bringing this up to the ladies here, as well as other people I was talking to, that you don't go to someone's house empty-handed, right? You don't ever go and just kind of show up. And if you do, well, that's your personal thing. But for me, I want to make sure that I am being respectful of the space in which I am being welcomed into. And although settlers, yes, kind of just crash landed here, for a lack of a better understanding, not all of people who are here did. There's a lot of enslaved people who were brought here forcibly, who had to learn how to make that land and make this land their own in the midst of so many horrific things. So it goes into having to understand how we understand land, how these enslaved people and their descendants understand land, and then being understanding that, you're here, you're welcome here, but we also want you to, come and give us a little bit of a gift as well on understanding us to a certain extent.
Yeah, so those kind of fall into like those are the actionable parts then of a land acknowledgement. It's something that has to be followed through with some sort of reciprocation, or, I guess, how are you benefiting? Maybe that's something that people need to ask themselves is, when I make a land acknowledgement, how am I benefiting Native people? And so, what are some of those ways that people should, what do we want? What do we as Native people want from these land acknowledgements? Maybe we could start with,
land back.
Land back, right? What does that mean?
Go.
Okay, so I just wanted to say that. Yeah, land back means, how can we as Indigenous people begin to reclaim the land that was stolen from us, either through treaties, through horrible business practices done to us by miners, through extraction, all of these different things, cities being being built on top of us. How can we start making this more accessible and our land accessible? Because a lot of times we as Native people are being kept from our land due to private property rights, due to a slew of other things. And I think we want our land back. We want it in some way, and we want to work with people to get it back. And in some cases, yes, just give it back. You can sign over any land title over to me and I will be appreciative.
I think in addition to land back, it's also giving us the space to be ourselves, to practice our culture, to practice our traditions, to bring Native knowledge to the forefront. It's giving us those opportunities. As Native people, we have a relationship with the land. Our languages are based around our land bases. Our ceremonies are based around our relationship to the land. We have knowledge of how to take care of the land. And so for us, it's also helping to revive all of those other pieces. It's helping to revive our language. It's helping to revive our traditions. It's connecting us that way. And so for us as Native people struggling to have our voices heard, to be represented, and to access the same rights as any other person in this country, land acknowledgement is a really good step to helping formalize those relationships and remind us that we are in a different spot, in a different relationship because of who we are as Native people.
And just to kind of piggyback on that, thinking about museums in particular, it's understanding that every part of our material and intangible culture is related to the land. And when it comes to those items that are in museums, whether it be that, you know, the tangible objects or our languages or our stories, that we are in fact experts and we know best how to relate to that material and how to take care of it because they're our relatives. And I think for a long time, Indigenous people have been regarded as consultants whose voice, you know, it's nice to listen to, but it doesn't necessarily matter. And I think what we want to come out of these land acknowledgements is respect and to be treated as true valued stakeholders in these institutions when it comes to our material and intangible culture.
Right.
And to kind of, if you don't, sorry, Debra, I'm glad Felicia brought that up because I've tried to base a lot of my work on grounding Indigenous methodologies on material culture and how do we understand them. And I think when I try to think about this, it's you have built a museum dedicated to our apparent extinction, basically, these larger institutions that were made in the 1890s. And you've brought all of these items together here that are from different land, that are from different waterways, that are from different perspectives, and they all live together now in some sort of way. And how does all of those things manifest? How do we understand the way that the land that whatever museum is on, how does that relate to the items that are inside of the collection? What can we do to bring them in conversation to one another? And I think one big part that a lot of institutions need to do is to really take the time to understand our different worldviews and to really get to know us on a real personal level by going to the land we call home and understanding why it is so important to us and learning from us. I don't think enough institutions maybe see that as viable or something that's or that they can probably profitable because who wants to send everyone off on a trip? But that's where the real learning comes from. We can talk about land all day, but unless you're there and experiencing it and feeling it and learning from us and hearing us speak our language to it, it has a completely different relationship than what you are being able to experience.
Yeah, so just by acknowledging land, I mean, you can't just acknowledge land, right? And who used to live there, who still lives there. I mean, it really just, it does force you or force non-Native people to acknowledge us, to acknowledge people, to acknowledge living Native people, right? I mean, I think it's easy to sometimes create a land acknowledgement that, you know, is only in past tense. I acknowledge the people that used to live here. But, you know, it's like, well, you know, we're here. What about the people that are still there in your city, in your town, in your neighborhood? I mean, that's just something that's so important to acknowledge. And that's part of the process, right? Part of the process is, as you've all been saying, is engaging with Native people. I mean, what else goes with that process, though, of creating a land acknowledgement? It's not something that you just go on YouTube or, I mean, Google, sorry, and Google search, oh, these are the people that used to live here. I mean, you could do that, right? But then you have a less meaningful statement. So what does that look like to engage with Native communities for a land acknowledgement?
Oftentimes folks just think that means a one-time relationship with the Indian Center. So folks will come in and say, oh, we need a land acknowledgement. Can you help us out? Yeah, okay, we can do that. And so we'll give you a land acknowledgement and I'll probably ask you to pay for it because it takes work and it takes some time on my part. But that's just one tiny little step in terms of what we're asking for. The payment is not necessarily just to pay for my time or for my energy. It's to pay for all the work that we're doing to continue to support Native people who live here. We want you to engage in long-term relationships with us in order to help find the ways to bring structural changes to policies, to procedures, to the situation that we're in. One of the things that I'm constantly reminded of here in Illinois is that we have, I'm not crying because of the statement, but we have no federally recognized tribes in this state. And part of that is due to relocation, part of that is due to genocide, part of that is due to colonization and these structural elements that are still alive and well today. So the more that we can remind folks that the Native people who lived here forever are still here today, are still doing this stuff, and we're honoring the work that we're doing to keep this culture alive. That's where it really comes into play. We have to remember too that we're constantly learning and updating and changing things, even about ourselves as Native people. We learn stuff all the time. We have to update our histories. We have to change information because we find out new stuff. That's really cool. So sometimes our land acknowledgements change. That means that if you're not checking in with us constantly as an organization, you're not getting updated information from us. You're not engaging in that full-on relationship that we're looking for in order to help provide correct and accurate information about who we are and how we've always been connected to this area. So it's about long-term relationship building. It's about changing these structures. It's not just this one time, oh, we did it, we checked a box. It's about truly engaging and finding ways to help support all Native people in the work that they're doing.
And just to add onto that, I mean, the goal is to ideally develop those long-term mutually beneficial relationships that Heather is talking about. But I get a lot of people who maybe don't have the resources or the time to do that, and so people reach out to me and ask me to write land acknowledgements for them. And that's just something that I've committed to not doing, because I think that a huge part of the acknowledgement is doing the work to learn about Indigenous peoples, our histories, our contemporary experiences, our cultures, and to also do the work to develop those relationships, to connect with people so that you can have that rapport where eventually you are able to communicate with a group and ask them how they want to be acknowledged. But when you're just starting out and you ask someone to write a land acknowledgement for you, I think that just demonstrates a lack of interest in doing the work that's necessary to build those connections. And so I really just urge people to read a book or, go on Google, attend some webinars or, talks like this. I think it's really important to invest your own time and energy into crafting the acknowledgement and learning.
Mm-hmm. And I'm hearing so many great things. And I'm also thinking about, one of the goals that I have in being in my position is to want to help institutions, whether that's a university, whether that's museums or archives, really start to have those hard conversations on how we can start to support Native people and what does that look like. And usually that beginning talk is, I don't mind having those conversations with you. But then after that, I want to be either compensated or I want to be able to trust that you will support me in the work that I do, meaning that you will have me back for talks or that you will be, open up your space to me when I come and I want to meet with ancestors, that I can have access to your resources that are already kind of established on some level. I think for people, it is, when they hear, compensation, they think of it as monetary value, which a lot of it, yes, of course. However, if you can open your doors to having us speak in your space, to actually having us have conversations with you, to having your directors or anyone just listening to us, that goes a long way and shows that you're trying to go beyond just the statement and to kind of just acknowledge what we got in the chat is there's I grew up in Southern California. There's like 15 or 20 different communities that are there. And they have figured it out how to live together simultaneously right now. However, the thing is that for me, the most important part of acknowledging land is that this land was occupied before settlers. And this land will be occupied after, if there is an after with settlers. It's more important for people to understand that 1492 was not the day that Native Americans began to live on this continent. No, we were here always. And if you can't identify our names, at least acknowledge that that was what was here and that we're still here. And that's where I get the most from.
Yeah. Yeah, talking about like compensation and you know, and paying Native people, you know, to help with land acknowledgements, you know, it's acknowledging us and valuing us as experts, because you know these institutions and universities and whatnot, you know, they can't bring in an academic or a scholar without compensating them financially for their expertise, right? So that's something that's important. And I think, yeah, I mean, these are all like really, really great actions that, you know, like these big institutions can take, but how do we hold them accountable? Like what do we do to hold them accountable? They've brought us in, they've collaborated or consulted with us to create a land acknowledgement. And then, you know, they have their land acknowledgement that they're going to use forever. But then they've made some commitments to, you know, give back to Native people or Native communities. But then let's say in a couple of years, you know, the trend is over. They forget about us. Then what do we do? How do we keep them accountable?
Well, there's, I feel like there's several things. I feel like the base of all of this though goes back to having to make these places much more transparent in what they are actually doing to make these things a priority. I think institutions are very scared at times at admitting that they don't know what to do, and instead they just decide to do nothing. And instead, it should be that they should want to reach out and make some mistakes and then have us work with you and to do it. And that's hard because no one wants to feel like they don't know what they don't know. Like they don't want to feel inadequate. However, in my head, if these institutions and the people who run them can find space to be able to move around and listen and sit with us and talk with us, and there's more of a reason to want to come back to this and say to them, like, I want to continue to help you. I want to continue to do this with you. And also, though, if they're transparent, and I'm going to say this as well, is that now that we have been having this panelist talk, all of you, 104 of you who are on here, and everyone watching on YouTube, we are giving you knowledge and experience and things to you right now for basically for free, and saying, like, this is what you can be doing with your land acknowledgement. And you no longer have an excuse to say you didn't know any better, or you didn't know who to reach out to, or you didn't know that there were what resources. And that has to be accountability for an institution as well, that if they're going to be transparent, they need to be ready for people to hold them accountable, and not being worried about that so much. So as we move forward, I continue to help. I hope that you can all help spread the message that you're learning here to not just your colleagues, but to your family and friends as well. And realize that you now have resources available to you that you didn't before, and it's your responsibility to pass it on.
I think an important, oh, sorry, Heather.
Oh, go ahead, Felicia.
I think another important thing to understand is that it's not just the job of Indigenous people to hold these institutions accountable. Like, just like Miranda is saying, the reason that we're putting this information out there is so that allies and accomplices can be better equipped to stand alongside us and join us in holding these institutions accountable. as you all know, there aren't many Indigenous people who work in museums. And so it's an extremely difficult and emotionally trying job to constantly work to hold them accountable. And so, we just ask that all of our allies out there continue to do this work as well.
You said that perfectly. That's what I was going to say, Felicia. So nice job. I think I want to jump in real quick because I know I said it, Felicia said it, Meranda said it, Debra said it. We're talking about this emotional labor part. And real quick, I just want to touch on that because I think this is oftentimes not understood by folks that we engage with in these conversations. And so I just want to define this and put this out there real quick. So that way we have an idea. So Native Americans, we still live in genocide. The federal government still has records of, our roll numbers. We still have a system of blood quantum. So on some level, we're dying out because of laws that are on the books. So we deal with that every day as Native people, and when we're being brought into these conversations around things like land acknowledgements or around Native history or around Columbus Day or around mascots or, whatever topic it is, that brings up these feelings that we have to deal with around the fact that we still live in genocide. So we've got to deal with all the emotional stuff that comes with that. We've got to take that into account. Sometimes it gets difficult to follow up with a meeting after you spent a whole time writing a land acknowledgement and then remembering that your ancestors got pushed out of this land and now you live in a place that's foreign to you. And like your mind just goes there sometimes. And so you may not be in your best shape for another meeting, or you may not feel like going to work the next day. And why? It's just because of all of this stuff that gets put on us as Native people in a professional setting. That's the emotional labor. So sometimes when we say like, we just can't for the day, I mean, that's why. And you have to realize that we're still working through that too as Native people. And we just need our allies to understand that that's where we're coming from. That's why this work is so difficult and so hard for us sometimes.
Yeah, we need people to share in the emotional labor, right? Like that burden shouldn't, especially in this case, like the burden should not fall completely on us, because we we go through so much emotional and mental labor in just the places that we work, in just walking out in the street sometimes, like. Especially in those cities that have racist mascots, there's that daily microaggression that we face, and that's, that all builds up. So that's part of the process, right? Part of the process for non-Native people in making their land acknowledgements or creating one is to suffer some hardships, to make mistakes, to I think also to have humility, right? Because, I've heard some really awful land acknowledgements, or I've been asked to consult on some really awful land acknowledgements. And it's so hard for me, I don't want to have to worry about not hurting somebody's feelings because they wrote something so awful, and that's not fair. What do you do? What is there, like a really bad land acknowledgement you've heard that?
I was just going to jump off from, I'm sure I have, yes. I just can't remember. But what I'm thinking of, especially when we're talking about the trauma and all of the things, and I can say what makes a land acknowledgement awful is exactly not having one at all. So that makes a land acknowledgement awful. But going back really quick is, as we are thinking about the emotional trauma in which that we are doing things and thinking about, is all of the things that we're offering you are things you need to consider when you are even developing a land acknowledgement. So who was here? So for example, I live in Chicago. So who was here in Chicago? Ancient, prehistoric. Who was removed? How were they removed? When were they removed? What did that look like? Talking to descendants, getting to know people. And for me personally, the biggest issue with this particular city is how much Native people have been erased from the narrative of this city, even though everything, when you look at the flag, when you look at the statues around town, when you go and you look at that different pathways, the lake, that's all indigenous. That's all indigenous knowledge. There's so much encapsulated history into that, but we have been systematically erased. So purposely, it's been almost, I don't want to say done well, but it has been the case. So what you have to think about when you're sitting there thinking about it is educating yourself on what did these people who were removed or what did they go through and why and how? Because that's our lived experience, right? We already have that. But a lot of American history classes make you go through the hard literature and the hard records and to sit there and really dig deep. And that's what I think is required for a lot of us, including me when I'm in a place that I don't know enough about. I need to sit and really think about what that experience looked like.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely. I mean, it's really hard to identify like specific elements of a good land acknowledgement or to come up with like a formula of like, this is what you need for it to be good, because I feel like the thing that makes it good is that it's genuine, that it comes from a place of true understanding, or at least true effort to understand. And you can really tell when someone is giving a land acknowledgement and they're just going through the motions. And that's why every time I do a land acknowledgement, I write something different each time. I don't have a formula. I think about where I am, any knowledge that I've, come to learn since the last acknowledgement I gave. And then like, what is that specific event taking place? If I'm doing an acknowledgement for a group of museum professionals, I'm going to talk about museums and the harm that has been perpetuated by these institutions. I think that making them genuine and specific is what makes them good.
And again, being in relationship with the Native people who are in your area. I mean, even if it's finding one organization, and now I know I'm going to get a zillion calls when I say this, so I understand what I'm doing to myself. Even if it's finding that one organization in your area that even mentions Native people, like give them a call, say, hey, I'm interested in doing a land acknowledgement. This is what I've done so far, and sharing your work, like start it for us first, at least. As busy as I am and as crazy as my life is, I'll definitely spend some time helping you with something that you've already put together if you're truly making an effort to make changes. I think that's super important. And as we learn to be in new relationship with one another, that's how we're going to be a better society moving forward, and how we're going to understand and find ways to incorporate Native knowledge into all of our worldviews.
Yeah, and I think for seeing and listening to you all and seeing some of the questions, I think what really needs to happen on a personal level for each other as well as myself is we need to begin holding these places, our schools, our institutions accountable today as we are working, because we could give you all the tools and a template, but unless there is already systematic changes on the way that Native people are being treated in these spaces, is it really making a change? Are we really doing anything different than the people who founded those places? I think it's, for me, that we need to go to the school boards and the museum boards and all of these different boards and ask them to make more accommodations for us as people, so to have access to the resources that they have. And I think that for me, the relationship like a museum might have to Native people begins by saying, we have been complicit in the way that we have been representing Native people, but not only Native people, Indigenous people from across the world. And we have helped shape some harmful narratives and things about these groups that continue to linger. And this is how we've done that. And then this is how we're going to fix it. And so you have to be able to sit in that uncomfortable place and say, yeah, we messed up and it's been really, really bad. And we have been really, really bad. And we have a roadmap of how we're going to change it. But I know that comes again with whatever humility and putting aside ego. And it's okay. We all do it. That's a marker of at least someone who's trying. And you can tell when you're doing your land acknowledgement that that's what's coming across.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to add really quick, Miranda, I think you articulated that really well. And I just wanted to like emphasize the point that the land acknowledgement itself is not decolonizing. It's never the end point. Like once you start doing a land acknowledgement, like yes, like wonderful, celebrate for a moment, but it's literally the first step. Like your institution is not decolonized once you do a land acknowledgement. Yeah, it's the tiniest baby step that will start you on that journey.
Yeah. So it looks like we're coming to, I hope we can go over a little bit, but because I have another question that I was going to bring up. But before that, I was going to say, and don't ask us to do your land acknowledgements for you, right? Because I know, Heather, you living here in Chicago, people are constantly, and I don't know how many times I've seen you like do a land acknowledgement. I mean, whose responsibility is that to do the land acknowledgement, to actually make the statement?
As much as I love giving them every single day, I don't. It's everybody's responsibility to do this. It's everybody's responsibility to have a relationship with a Native person. It's everybody's responsibility to understand that there are systems in place that still allow for structural racism to exist. So in trying to break that down and trying to find ways to change the way we think, then it's everybody's responsibility to do a land acknowledgement. If you're concerned about the language in a land acknowledgement, again, like reach out to your Native friend, like ask for help in pronouncing words that you're unsure of. We probably know how to pronounce them, and we'd be happy to walk you through that. And that shouldn't be something that stops you from giving a land acknowledgement. That's an easy fix. We're here to do that for you, and we'll okay. I will help you. I will help you. You may have to ask me like 4 times, but I'll help you. I will. And why? Because this land wants to hear that. This land wants to hear our language. They want to hear our names. They want to hear our relationships to this place that we call home. So this is really important to help change that system that we put in place.
Tiffany, we can talk later about decolonization and everything that it is.
Yeah, I'm actually going to share a slide that, hopefully folks will have time to take a screenshot of, that has our contact information. So if you want to reach out to anyone here. So we should be winding down now. There's a ton of questions, right? Like we didn't hit upon everything. We can't give you all the answers. Because, part of that process is that, you need to put some labor into this. You need to do some of that work. We can't give you every single answer, to all of your burning questions about land acknowledgements right here. So, I hope that, this at least helps you, or, helps guide you, our audience, into a good direction, in taking that step toward making a land acknowledgement and benefiting Native people. So before we conclude, I want to give you 3 a chance to share any final thoughts. If you have any final thoughts.
I have a final thought. This is not really a final thought, but this is in response to a couple of chat questions from folks that work in churches. I've been recently thinking about church land acknowledgements, and one of the things that I think could set church land acknowledgements apart is an actual recognition around the doctrine of discovery. When we start thinking about how land actually got taken from Native people, it was with the doctrine of discovery and the Pope saying that land could be taken from people who were not Christian in order to Christianize them. So when we think about that history, and when we think about that, what is now like basically a fake legal title to taking land that we've been institutionalized to think is okay. When I think of churches making land acknowledgements, that's a really great place to start. Start looking at that history, start talking about how your relationship is to your own belief system and what that looked like in order to help remove Native people from the land. So I'll just leave you guys, I'll leave my church folks with that sentiment. And my final closing is definitely all do land acknowledgements, find out whose land you're on, figure out who's still thriving in your communities and look into them. And if you get so moved, donate to any of our organizations on this call today, because we've done a lot of work for you guys and we're going to give you some resources, and we'd really appreciate any little help that you can give to us. And Debra has included all that, so I'm done. Thank you.
I'm actually going to share the slide that I have that has all that information, but Felicia and Miranda, please, if you have any final thoughts you want to share.
I just wanted to address something in the chat also, and I plan to address it a little bit in a moment when I think we're all gonna wrap up with our own statements. But someone brought up this peaceful 3-day occupation of the plaza in Santa Fe that has been going on, and actually ended today with the toppling of a colonial monument. And so I really just wanted to address it because I think it's cause for celebration. And yes, it does absolutely tie into land acknowledgement. A major part of the colonial project has been to reinterpret Indigenous land, and that is exactly what monuments have been created to do. They not only erase Indigenous history and place names and importance of land, but they overwrite it with violent and colonial figures or tributes to events. And so I think, you know, as we remove these monuments, it definitely relates to this topic of land acknowledgement. And I think it's cause for celebration when we are able to reintegrate some Indigenous knowledge into the our shared understanding of place.
And I'll just end that. I'm so happy that happened. And I'll just end with always my thing in life. And when I go into collections or when I go into a space where I'm with friends or family, be humble and go in with a good heart and understanding that what you are viewing that is ours, and even on the land that you are sitting on and the lakes that you're on and everything that you are doing that involves nature and an environment has been prayed over and has been looked after for generations of Indigenous people. And it is something so special that we should all be honored and humbled to be a part of. And when I say have a good heart, that means don't do it just because you want to feel like you can appropriate something or anything like that. No, you do that because you're genuinely trying to heal things and fix and do good in the world. And being humble is something I think all of us need, especially in today's world. So this pasemu to all of you for listening today.
So we decided we would do something different. Rather than having started this conversation with a land acknowledgement, we're all going to end with our land acknowledgements. And, you know, keeping in mind that, yes, a land acknowledgement is something that's a living entity. It's something that evolves, it changes as you learn, as you have conversation. So mine has gone through different iterations, and currently this is my land acknowledgement. Although I consider myself a Chicagoan, as a Jemez Pueblo and Korean woman, I acknowledge that I am a guest on this land. This land was home to Potawatomi people who were forcibly removed from here, Chicago. Ojibwe, Odawa, Menominee, Ho-Chunk, Miamia, and Peoria people also had relationships with this land and each other. My respects and gratitude go out to all the Native ancestors who once lived here and to my Native brothers and sisters who are here now and who will always be here. Who wants to, anyone want to go next?
I can. All right, friends, this is some of the gems of wisdom you get from the Indian Center. So today I acknowledge and give respect to the land that Chicago now claims. I'm thankful to be sitting in a place that has major waterways that created trading routes and urban lifestyles. Most importantly, I give honor and gratitude to the first peoples of this area who lived in relationship, cared for, and welcomed others to this area. I recognize the Potawatomi, Ojibwe, and Odawa nations as the signers of the Treaty of Chicago, both of them. I also recognize that other tribes, including the Ho-Chunk, Miami, Menominee, Illinois Confederacy, and Peoria peoples, maintained relationships with this area too. Despite government policies that enforce genocide of American Indians, Chicago today is home to the 6th largest urban Indian population and consists of members from well over 100 different tribal nations. We all continue to live, love, work, play on, and share these lands as our families and relations taught us to.
I guess I'll go just to wrap up the Chicago aspect. Yes, so mine pretty much is along the same terms as Heather and Debra because we all live in this city and we all talk to each other. But I always start with, as a Northern Paiute woman, it is an honor and a privilege to be able to call Chicago my home, and that those that came before me who called this land home should and deserve the respect and the honor of everything that they've done to help steward this land. So that includes the Potawatomi, the Odawa, the Ojibwe, Ho-Chunk, Miami, Sac and Fox, Peoria, a slew of other people. And also thinking about something I'm adding into the future is how we understand that although this is the land of Lincolns, what does that mean in terms of the enslaved people who were forcibly brought here?
All right. So I am honored to currently live and work as a guest on Tewa land in Ogapoge, or White Shell Water Place. This place that is widely recognized today as New Mexico is home to 19 pueblos, as well as several Apache and Navajo communities who all continue to maintain vital connections to this landscape. Many people are familiar with the Pueblo Revolt of 1680. Oh, sorry about that, guys. Many people are familiar with the Pueblo Revolt of 1680, but it is important to understand that Indigenous peoples have been continuously resisting colonization in this place and most places. Oh my gosh, someone's really trying to get a hold of me. In this place and most places for over 500 years. In fact, today, many Indigenous community members and allies gathered downtown to demand the removal of a racist monument that celebrated colonialism and violence against Indigenous peoples, and they were actually successful in taking it down. Oh my goodness. Because I could not be there today, I ask you to join me in acknowledging and celebrating that incredible communal act of resistance. I also ask you to join me in honoring the ancestors of this place. I ask you to join me in paying respect to all of the Indigenous people who are very much still here. And I ask you to join me in recognizing that Indigenous people will still be here in the future, stewarding the land, maintaining our cultures, and thriving. As you know, today is Indigenous Peoples Day, so I ask that you spend some time doing research about the communities that call the land you occupy home, and think about tangible ways to support and celebrate those communities, not just today, but every day. So please consider donating to an Indigenous organization in your community. If you would like to support one that is based in so-called Santa Fe, Debra shared the link to a GoFundMe for the Santa Fe Indian Center on the previous slide. And for those of you who work in museums, I also strongly urge you to spend some time today reflecting on how these institutions, and the ones you represent in particular, have contributed to settler colonialism, thereby harming Indigenous people. And please think about some ways that you as an individual can work to address and dismantle that legacy. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Oh, thank you so much, ladies. Thank you for, having this conversation with me. I think, and I hope that, people will come away having learned something. So, and as I mentioned earlier, there's so many questions that need to be answered, and we can't answer all of them here. It's so important for everyone to do the work, put in the labor, reach out to Native people, engage, build relationships, give back, and yeah, compensate Native people for the hard work that they do. But we want to have those conversations with you. So feel free to reach out to us. And I just want to give a quick shout out to our social media and web team for helping us pull all this together and make it available as a live stream on YouTube. And our IT people who worked so hard in also making sure this was easy for me to manage. And most especially a huge thank you to Heather Miller and Felicia Garcia and Meranda Roberts for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge with everyone here. So thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your Indigenous Peoples Day.